All right,
He's
he's
been the
been the
advisor
man
behind some.
behind.
I'm sorry. Go ahead, Mika.
Yes. Okay, he's been the man behind some of President Trump's most controversial policies and speeches. Now a new book is taking a closer look at Stephen Miller and his impact on the administration. Joining us now, investigative reporter Jean Guerrero. She's the author of the new book entitled Hate Monger, Stephen Miller, Donald Trump, and the White Nationalist Agenda. Joe.
Yeah, I mean, it's obviously even the title is extraordinarily harsh, but if you just do a basic Google search, Gene, you see that, of course, David Duke praising Donald Trump time and time again for his policies after Charlottesville. And you see Stephen Miller as a Senate aide passing around articles written in white nationalist publications, and even being praised by white nationalist Richard Spencer. What did you find out in researching your book?
Yeah, Stephen Miller is a case study in radicalization. In my book, Hate Monger, I show how he was indoctrinated during a difficult time in his life. You know, his family had lost a lot of money. He was feeling displaced. And this is when he meets a conservative writer through his high school named David Horowitz, who introduces Stephen Miller to the fantasy that he needs to save the United States from certain destruction in the form of too many brown and black people coming here. This is a man who ends up becoming like a father figure to Stephen Miller, and who believes that the only real racism is racism against white men. And, you know, I obtained emails showing Horowitz, shaping Stephen Miller's career, feeding explosive talking points for the Trump campaign, feeding policies through Miller that you saw Trump adopting thereafter. So Miller really, with his help and the help of other extremist mentors, learned how to launder white supremacist viewpoints through the language of heritage, through the language of economics, and through the language of national security in order to make it palatable to the mainstream. That's really what I show in my book.
So Stephen Miller, of course, had a pretty remarkable rise, Gene, from a congressional aide who would pepper reporters' inboxes with talking points about immigration to being one of Jeff Sessions when he was Senator of Alabama, one of his top advisors, to then moving to the Trump campaign and now being, of course, a powerful voice in the building behind me. Talk a little bit about how you see his influence, those ideas that you're talking about now, being enacted into policy, how you're seeing it drive day in and day out, being generated from the West Wing. What sort of imprint have you seen Miller leave?
Well, so I truly believe, after reporting for this book, Hate Monger, that if you want to understand the disaster that we're living today in 2020, you have to understand Stephen Miller. Stephen Miller is a public relations flack who, at the age of 31, with little policy experience, was put in charge of making policies for this country. And from day one in the White House, he began to narrow the focus of the Department of Homeland Security away from its focus of protecting the American people from its broad mandate of protecting them from terrorism, protecting them from public health crises like the pandemic, into something that was laser focused on his obsession, keeping brown and black people out of this country. Mostly asylum seekers and refugees, people who in most cases didn't break any laws, not criminals and cartels like Trump likes to say, but truly families. And for Stephen Miller, as I show in my book, Hate Monger, it's about re-engineering the demographics into this country. In the book, I connect the dots between everything that Miller does and his white supremacist influences. For example, Miller pulled policies directly from think tanks that were created by white supremacists who believe in population control for non-white people. He repeatedly disregarded the input of national security experts to push through his white nationalist agenda. And as a result of this, from my conversations with White House officials for the book, Americans have been left vulnerable to a range of real threats, including the public health crisis that we're seeing today.
Jane, this is Michael Steele. To pick up on that re-engineering part of this narrative in your book, how has he been able to get the Republican establishment, of which he presumably has been outside of, to so conform in such a short time to this sort of white supremacist narrative? Now, is that something that sort of sort of baked into the party, so it was an easy transition. What's your analysis, and what does your book tell us about how he was able to broaden the scope of that philosophy to not just policy, but to the body politic as a whole?
Well, that's a great question. And it has to do with, as I show in the book, that Stephen Miller was instrumental in Trump's win in 2016 because of his anti-immigrant agenda. So the Republican Party began to realize that this anti-immigrant hostility was really speaking to voters. And beyond that, a big part of the reason he's been so influential in the White House is that Stephen Miller gets Donald Trump in a way that I believe no one else in the White House does. Part of this has roots in his childhood, which I delve into in the book. Stephen Miller's father is a real estate investor who's described to me as being very Trump-like, was plagued by bankruptcies and numerous legal disputes. So part of it is he grew up in a similar family. The other thing is that Stephen Miller, and this part is really important, Stephen Miller always encourages Trump's most aggressive and most violent impulses, which Trump appreciates, because every time he listens to a more moderate advisor, he gets pummeled and ridiculed by his base as weak, which Trump hates. He wants to be seen as a killer, and Stephen Miller shares his instincts for violence, and he has he has his fingers on the pulse of his most violent voting base, who want to see these really hostile policies separating children from their parents, systematically turning away the most vulnerable, most desperate people at the U.S.-Mexico border. So all of these very cruel policies, he needs the hatred in order to rally people around these policies, and he's been very effective at getting that hatred through systematic demonization of immigrants, as well as the people who support them in the Democratic Party.
Yeah, what's fascinating is that you are so right. All of the aides that have come in and out of the White House, I mean, there have just been a steady stream, an unprecedented stream. The one person who has held on is Stephen Miller, because Stephen Miller always plays to the lowest common denominator when it comes to anti-immigrant, racist rhetoric. Well, the book is Hate Monger, Stephen Miller, Donald Trump, and the White Nationalist Agenda. Jean Guerrero, thank you so much. I greatly appreciate it. Miki, first of all, that's fascinating that Stephen Miller has held on, and he's held on by being that voice that is the most extreme voice in Donald Trump's ear. And he's held on over the past 3.5 years. What's also interesting is, I laughed about it during the campaign and even afterwards, how stupid Donald Trump's argument was about everybody crossing the border. And if you remember, throughout 2016 and into 2017, I kept repeating that cross-border crossings were at their lowest point in half a century. There was no crisis. When Barack Obama left office, let me say this again, because I know, again, there is sort of this cult of personality, and a lot of people get really upset when you give them the facts and they go against the alternative reality that Donald Trump has spun in their head. When Donald Trump got into office, he was talking about building the wall, which, by the way, he never did. And Mexico never paid for that imaginary wall.
Never did.
But when he got into office, cross-border illegal crossings were at a 50-year low. I was in elementary school playing t-ball when they were that low. And I'm really old. So the point is, Donald Trump and Stephen Miller are doing, and yes, I'll say her name again, what Anne Applebaum writes about in The Twilight of Democracy, when she says that Viktor Orban is still using the Muslim invasion of Hungary to hold on to power when no such invasion ever took place. They just don't have a lot of Muslims in Hungary, and yet he continues to use this lie. Now listen, cross-border illegal crossings exploded under Donald Trump. He just couldn't do as good a job at it as Barack Obama. It's a reality if you look at Donald Trump's own numbers inside the government. But Mika, how fascinating and how frightening that there are enough people out there who want to be a member of a personality cult, a political cult, that they just ignore the facts that even the Trump administration is putting out.